So let's continue our art history lessons. I'm going to go back to the ancient Cycladic artwork. I wanted to just remind you of that, especially because it's in the same area. It's in the Mediterranean, it's part of the Greek islands, and we're going to be going to Crete next. So I just wanted to come back to this and remind you of the Cycladic art, the ancient goddess figures that we saw, and the time period. We don't know when they started. It's prehistoric. Most of the artworks, the sculptures that we saw around 2000, they're considered to be around 2500 BC. So here's one of the goddess figures like we saw last time. There's a larger one in the middle, a smaller one over to the left, and here's some of their pottery, jugs, and oil lamps, larger pots. So just to put that in context, that's the one we saw last time. And here's one I didn't show you, a little marble figurine of a harp player. So we saw the goddess figures, but we didn't see anything like this. The arms are broken off. I'm guessing they would have come here to be playing the strings on this ancient harp. Very typical shape of the head, leaning back, very simple face, very open to what's above. It's nice with this photo, you can see the reflection over here repeating it from the other side. You get that same gesture over there. Here's a map, so you know the areas that we're talking about. Here's Greece, Athens, that's where Sparta was, Turkey over here, up here Troy, and the famous Trojan Wars, and here were those Cycladic islands. And then now we're going down here to Crete. This is shows one of the cities, Heraklion, but the city we're mostly going to be talking about is called Knossos, the ancient capital of Crete. So just that you capture these words properly, the civilization of this ancient Crete is called Minoan. And you'll find this Minoan is expressed in the legends about King Minos, if you've heard of those, and some of the stories you've read. This is where he was living. And of course the Minotaur, the Mino bull, this famous mythological figure in the labyrinth. This all comes from this time period and this culture that was on the island of Crete. In this time period here, 2500 to around 1700 BC. Here's another map to give you an impression. There's Troy, Athens, Rome, Carthage, Knossos here on this Minoan culture, down here Egypt, Alexandria, Tyre over there. So this is the place we're looking at today. The culture, the Minoan culture on the island of Crete, and the famous city of Knossos. Here's an artist's impression. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. It's been lined up of the construction, the palace of Knossos. You can see it's famous for these many rooms and layers, a very complicated building of that time period. I'll show you another picture in a moment. You can see these columns better, and also these bull horn symbols on the top of the roofs. This is also an artist's reconstruction. They use their imagination. Some of it is accurate and some of it's imaginary, but it helps us to get a picture. So the things that are accurate are the columns, the color, and the shape, narrow at the bottom and wider at the top, and the red and the black, and then the bull head. I'll show you an actual real image of this, and then all over the roof line of the building, these bull horn shapes. So something very significant about the bull for these people. Now this is going into the actual building. It has been repaired. Some reconstruction has been done, but quite accurate to the colors and shapes. So there you see the real columns now, You can see they have a base, a wall, and the column itself is not really huge, but they're small at the bottom, wider at the top. They have this round shape at the top, and the color scheme is quite accurate. This room is called the Room of the Shields, and these forms on the walls are paintings of the Cretan shields that they would carry. So this very interesting and large shape is kind of like a figure of 8 shape, and this vertical stripe down the middle. And you also see the decorations on the walls, these forms, these spiraling form drawing forms that you're familiar with, running wave form. So this is original from 2500 BC. We come into the throne room. There's this throne, stone carved throne, and in front of it is this vessel. Here you see the paintings on the walls, very typical of the Cretans, these bright and strong colors. And then here you have this painting of a griffin, lion's body and eagle's head, beautiful design on its shoulder. Here's a closer up, carved in stone. And then the griffins facing whoever it was, King Minos, who sat on this throne. Beautiful forms of the lily plant there. This gives an impression of the view out from that throne room over the landscape. This no one knows what this vessel is actually used for. Perhaps to make offerings to the king. That's a closer up of the griffin, just so you can enjoy the bright colors. And I want to show you this is very typical, these kind of wavy, looks quite free, wavy free shapes in the background, and then very precise the way they've painted, great precision, these shapes changing up to the head of the lily flower there. And we'll see it again and again, very, very exact feeling for the shapes of things. So that the shapes, strong, clean shapes, and accurate lines and beautiful, strong colors is typical. This is also painted. These interesting kind of freehand, just beautiful colors. This is a painting. These are frescoes, so you know about frescoes, how they would paint onto the wet plaster so it fixes it. These Cretan ladies dancing or doing some ritual, something. They have very similar gestures in their hands, holding them up. Their faces are very similar to each other. They have this hairstyle, flowing curls on the forehead. And something we see here, and we'll see it again and again, is the way that the face is painted in profile, and the eye is shown as if it's from the front. You see that again and again on many paintings. Something we also notice with Cretan paintings is we always see young and healthy and happy people. They're all smiling. We don't see any old or sad people or wounded or diseased. We don't see anything like that in the artworks. Here is a young man, also very stylized. It's a remarkable thin waist, and something has this amazing hat on with feathers, and then he's doing some gesture with his arms, flowing hair. So again, we see someone who's young and healthy, vibrant, strong colors in the background. We also see this face in profile and the eye from the front view. A man with fish. The bodies are painted very youthful. It's like a young boy, strong, quite dark skin color. And if you notice and the fish, he has his fish. But if you notice around that the decoration of the wall is blue, gold, and red. This is the same color that's used everywhere. So that reddish brown of his body, the blue of his scarf, same blue on the fish, same gold on the bellies of the fish. Another image of young boys fighting or boxing, doing something. Young, quite childlike bodies, I would say. Face in profile, eye front on. Strong colors. This same room, you can see that painting on the wall. And on this other wall you see these two goats. And I'd just like to point out how precisely they have been painted. There's really no hesitation in the way that they have captured these beautiful lines of the animal. There's something the way that they've captured these animals that reminds us of the way that the cave painters really captured the animals. Just absolutely perfect and simple and expressive. Up here we see the decoration around the top of the room, this repeating forms, a red form in the middle, and these kind of grayish blue leaves, heart-shaped leaves coming out over and over again. I'm going to talk more about the bull in a moment and what this painting's about, but first, for the first impression, I just would like to enjoy the color, bright color, strong colors, a very precise, exact line, and the way the sweep of the back here and this whip shape in the tail, very beautiful, beautiful curve, and the way that they capture these people in action, flying through the air, dancing, jumping, and the colors here, designs and patterns, and these very peculiar, interesting, freehand kind of shapes around the top and the bottom. So some things really, really precise, and other things kind of free and just playful. It's another very famous fresco of the dolphins and fish. You can see the room, the doorways through to other rooms and above, high up in the ceiling, these beautiful fish. There's another painting over here, a woman. You can see these strong red colors and black, and then down here a huge pot also with that spiral form on it. See the spiral forms. Here's a close-up of the dolphin. So these are interesting noses on these dolphins. They're not quite lifelike. They look a little bit like a duck or something, a beak. But so that's interesting. Beautiful color. This incredible blue, and this lovely wavy line here. And then to look into the eyes of the dolphin as well. They have the way the painter has captured the expression of these animals. The fish are not so much character, but the dolphins definitely have their interesting character. So these people, just to be a little bit more information about the people, they lived on a Greek island. They lived surrounded by the Mediterranean. They live off of the sea. They're very familiar with the sea life, creatures of the sea, with sailing, with boating, traveling on the sea, and trading. So this painting of the sea creatures is not unexpected, really. Here's a painting, again a fresco of a couple of birds, to draw your attention to the beautiful, bright and strong colors, yellow, red, blue. These people really loved bright colors. If you go to the Greek islands today, you'll still see people painting these colors on their houses. This beautiful light blue. And then to look, of course, more into the animals here, these two birds, how they have really, the painter has really managed to capture very elegantly and exactly these shapes. So a little bit, as we were talking about in the cave paintings, the relationship of the people to the animal kingdom, how they really knew and enjoyed the shapes and the colors of these birds. Really precise, exact reproductions. And then the plants as well, really fresh and full of life. This one's a little blurry, sorry, but it does show some human activity. The boats, the construction of the boat, the oars, you can see all the paddles or oars, the roof over the top. You see some of the buildings with people looking out. You see the mountains, and look up here, you even see some dolphins flying very high in the air. They've managed to leap very high out of the water. So some combination of reality depicting real life and then something a little fantastical up here. We come to some sculptures now, and here's a sculpture, a small sculpture of a man doing something with his fist and his head. I would like to point out before we talk more about his gesture that just the fact of it being in bronze. So we really are in a culture which managed to discover and make use of a new material, the most modern material at that time, which was bronze. As I mentioned to you before, the ability to combine copper with tin to make this stronger, more durable and worthwhile material in terms of tools and weapons. And here you see they've actually managed to make some figure, probably in clay, and then make a mold, and then to pour the molten bronze into the mold and break the mold away and get this bronze figure, which as you can see has lasted for thousands of years. So just to be conscious of the development of the technology, there's a whole new technology to allow this little figure to be made. And then we come to the position, the gesture. What are they doing when they make this figure with his hand to his forehead like that? It's such an interesting gesture. It looks a little bit to our eyes like someone is saluting. And who knows when the first salute was ever invented. But we could also, one thing to notice is that he actually has a fist. So he's closed his fist and placed his fist to his head. That's different from what we typically see with a military salute. And then we can also question, we don't know the answer, but question, was he making this kind of gesture to the king, or was he making it as a gesture of reverence, a kind of a gesture of prayer to the Greek god, ancient Cretan god, I should say. So it's just a very interesting gesture. When we put it together with other things that we know about these Cretan people, their ability to really observe nature and their inventiveness. So in a moment I'll tell you about the labyrinth. So here's another bronze figure, also it looks like a male figure, doing this same gesture. And so we can be interested if we saw such a sculpture once. It's not so interesting, but if we see many sculptures or paintings doing the same thing, then we can have an idea, oh, that's something to do with these people. This is an important gesture for them, this putting the hand up to the head, to the forehead especially. Now I want to show you some of their pottery. These huge pots they were able to make, ceramic pots. You can see by the scale of them next to the people there how huge they are. They're storage vessels. They can keep their oil, their wine, their produce. They can store things there during the winter. Possibly also that was how they shipped produce, by storing it in jars and then loading the jars into the ships. So just to be impressed by their ability to make these gigantic pots. And again, all the things we're seeing, they've lasted for a long, long time. We come to more of the decorative aspects of the pots. And again, the Cretan people, the Minoan people, love to do these decorations. Very lifelike, very energetic. Here's an octopus wriggling around on that pot. Here's another one. And this pot shows more of the very, very early Greek kind of classic appreciation for shape. So this very precise, very beautiful, very elegant shape that they create. The way that it stands on its base and its top, and how they divide the space of the pot up with the base, this dark brown, the band here, these three stripes, and then they create this space in the middle where they can make an image. And then there's another place up here. So it's something, the pottery has something like architecture with this space where you can do the artistic work. And very interesting. Maybe this is a squid, this one. This is the image that we saw on that artist's reconstruction at the very beginning of a bull's head. It's made in bronze, and some parts are highly polished. Horns and the nose and this decoration on its head. So one thing we know for certain about these Minoan people is they had some incredible appreciation for the bull. And at that time the bull was really the largest and most powerful creature in Europe. When we looked at the cave paintings, which were thousands and thousands of years before this time, then we saw some other creatures, buffalo and even a rhinoceros we saw on that cave painting. But by this time in Europe, the largest creatures is the bull. And so somehow this powerful creature was really important to the Cretan people. You can see that this decoration they've put on the forehead of the bull. I'm mentioning this again, that we saw those figures putting their hand to their forehead, and here we see something of the interest again in the forehead of this creature. This is a life-size, or maybe a little, probably life-size, maybe a little over, but I'm just thinking that some bulls do have these so enormous horns. And I'd like you to just notice what an elegant shape they have crafted here. This is all man-made. It's not a skull that's been decorated or painted. It's a sculpture that's been made in clay, made into a mold, and then cast in metal. Very complicated process. Here's a smaller bull's head, a little drinking vessel. You can see there's a hole here. They fill it up with something to drink, and then they would drink out of here. Probably during a festival, it would be a time to pass this around and celebrate. Notice the interesting geometrical designs, these form drawings that we see many of these in the Cretan, not in the Cretan, in Crete, but also later in Greek times, and we see it beginning already here in ancient Crete. Here is an example. We saw it on the artist's reconstruction, but here's the real thing. These symbolic bull's horns over the entrance to some part of the building. These are made out of two massive stones. You can see there's a join there. The scale is about the same height as that doorway, so they're around about 8 feet high. They pretty much fit into a square. There's some geometrical sense in this shape here, the outside shape. The outsides are straight, and then this elegant curve they've created on the inside. I don't know if this particular one, which has some importance over this doorway, you can see there was a big stone here, It's a bit broken off. Whether this has some importance, whether this particular bull's horn symbol lines up. It's so easy to imagine the sun rising here, or a moon, something in the sky, some stars at some particular point in the month or in the year. But in any case, you can see that it makes this doorway very important when you place this symbol over the top of it. Now, I'm not sure if this is true, but it'd be very interesting to imagine that was on the entrance doorway to the labyrinth, but I could just be making that up. So coming back to the bull, or continuing with this idea of the bull, here is a little bronze sculpture. Here's this leaping bull, very similar to the painting we saw, and the remains of a figure up here. You can see the legs are broken off there as the feet. So there would have been lower legs here, and his arms are missing. But in any case, you can see that this was one of these figures that was going to leap over the bull. And come back to this painting, where you can see something is going on here. This painting, we can ask the question, what is the painting actually about? You can see this bull is actually right off of the ground. He's kind of flying or leaping. It's like a bull in one of these rodeo shows. It's completely throwing itself up into the air. And these people, I think they are young men, but it's hard to know, are doing something very strange, grabbing hold of the bull here, flipping over its back and landing over here. And this next slide shows you a diagram of how it might have worked. That number 1 here, you see this person grabbing the bull's horns. The bull tosses its head, and the person uses that energy of the bull tossing its head to actually be lifted up and thrown over the back of the bull, lands on the bull's back there, and uses that as a springboard to do a further flip over the bull. So obviously this is something that can go horribly wrong, could easily get hurt. But this is such an interesting thing to think about, both with with this painting. Why did they paint that? Why did they make all these sculptures about that? Why did they do all those symbolic shapes of the bull and make those bulls' heads? So there's something very significant about the bull for this culture. We can think about that. Now, people actually still do this. This is in Spain, and you know about bullfighting, but not so many people know about the bull leaping, this leaping over the bull. So there's this man who's sprung over the bull there. There's one image of him, and there he is. He's landing on his hands behind the bull. The bull doesn't know what's going on. He's been tricked by this human being playing games with him. So this bull leaping is still being practiced in the south of France and in Spain. It's different. It's more playful, let's say, than the bull fighting, which has another aspect to it. Here is an image of the Minotaur. So you heard that word at the beginning. I will include in the documents a story, the legend of the Minotaur and of Theseus and Ariadne. You should read that if you don't know this story already. It's another way in to try and understand this culture. Together with the Minotaur was the invention of the labyrinth, and I'll show you a slide of that in a moment. There is Theseus inside the labyrinth. There's the Minotaur, and he has his sword. He's going to kill the Minotaur after many, many years of, as the legend goes, the Minotaur killing young people who come to Knossos and are sent into the labyrinth. We don't know really if the young people being sent from Athens as a sacrifice to the Minotaur, if this has something to do with these bull leaping games that we saw the paintings and the sculptures of. So that's a mystery. We have the legend and then we have these artworks, and the two are connected. Here is a much later sculpture. This is a Roman sculpture, but it's a copy of an earlier Greek sculpture, but it does give you an idea of how the Greeks thought about this Minotaur, this human body and bull head. The horns are missing on this one. And here we come to the labyrinth. This is an ancient coin from that time. It's in metal. I think it's silver. And you probably know about the labyrinth. But what you might not be certain about is that the labyrinth was invented at this time on ancient Crete with these Minoan people, that somehow together with the Minotaur, the legend of the Minotaur, was the creation of this it's a kind of a maze, a place where you get lost and confused, and the Minotaur would live in there. So the story, the legend, it goes that King Minos had his very clever two Greek scientists, Daedalus and his son Icarus, working for him. They were kept prisoner there, if you remember that story. And when the Minotaur was born, then he made Daedalus invent this labyrinth for him, for them, where the Minotaur would live. So this this is a maze. It's a place to walk in and get lost, and then the story is that people would go in there and the Minotaur would wait in there to capture them and kill them. These silver parts are the walls, and so the parts in between are where you would walk. So to get in, you have to follow these passageways, which go, in this case it's a square one, so you go on all these angles, and you can see, if you follow these passageways, how they are leading you further and further away from the center. But eventually, if you follow them, then you go on this long and confusing journey that eventually leads you to the center. Round and round and round and round and round, till finally you get into here, the heart of this shape. So you may not be so familiar with the square one. You probably are more familiar with this one, the rounded one. And this image, the way they have shown it is, sometimes we see it the other way around. You flip this around, so this is the bottom. It's the same form, same idea, except now a rounded journey, finding your way in. And you know, the story of Odysseus is much later. I'm not sure, 1,000 years later. The ancient poet Homer wrote those stories of the Iliad, the battle at Troy with the Trojans, and then following that, the Odyssey with Odysseus on his travels to find his way home. So it's written much later, but in the same people, and Odysseus has to travel through these oceans of the Mediterranean, the Sea of the Mediterranean, all these different islands and places, and his journey is very much a journey like being on the labyrinth. All the twists and turns and strange places and experiences he has to go to before he can finally find his way home. So there's something in that story which has this motif of a labyrinth in the story, even though this motif is living 1,000 years before. And something about this this form, maybe this next slide shows it a little better if we turn it upside down. So this is just a drawing, so it's easier to see. And I also flipped it over so you can see that this starts to resemble something. There's a kind of a shape here, especially when this one is a little higher than that one. And many of the things we've been looking at with these ancient Cretan artwork, I don't know if you can see this, it looks a lot like the side view of a human brain. on this journey of the labyrinth. It's a journey of into the center, to find your way into the center of things and not to get lost. So there's something connected in there with the beginnings of thinking, and later on in Greek times, in Greek culture, in this same area, this same land, or the same area of the Mediterranean Sea, and the Greek people, the birth of philosophy takes place. So there is something here in these ancient Minoan people of laying a foundation for this, what later could be the birth of philosophy. That is the last slide of this sequence. So I'm going to send you with this slideshow also the images, so you can look at the images one by one, and I'll also send you some assignments to do in your main lesson book. Okay,